just the Prophet and just the DX7. Now both together. Thank you for asking for this video. New preset as usual. I recommend that you do 4 things before getting started, which are detach the filter from the keyboard, zero out the envelope amount, open the cutoff, and reset the fine tuning of oscillator number 2. I don't know why, but I left these settings here on this default preset. So by doing this, you are creating a really blank preset. Maybe save this as a blank so that you have a starting point the next time you're going to recreate a Prophet sound from scratch. Now this is the blank sound. And we're gonna start with the envelopes because the trickiest part is the waveform, so that's the last thing that we're gonna do. And we're gonna stick to just oscillator number 1 for now. We know that the sound goes pow, pow, so we know that it has filter movements. And we know that it sustains at a midpoint. It doesn't completely fade out like pow, pow. The sound goes something like pow, pow. So this O is a sustaining point. There are 2 ways where we can find that sustaining point. One is by having the cutoff at a random position here and then finding the sustain, which is relative to the cutoff. But I recommend zeroing out the sustain and then just finding the right sustaining point with the cutoff knob. I think it sustains somewhere between 400 and 500 Hertz. Of course, if you have a real Prophet 5, you won't be able to see the units as I can see here in the plugin, but it's roughly pointing at 6 over there. But the sound's in the wrong octave, so I need to lower 1 octave for the first oscillator here. Yeah, that's what we want. Something like... So cut off pointing at 6. Now we need to find the right envelope amount. So I'm just going to increase here. I think 50% is nice. But this decay is too fast. The sound definitely doesn't go pow, pow. It's more like... So 2.5 seconds is nice, roughly pointing at 65, 67% here. And I do want some release because the sound is now fading out completely as soon as I release the keys. And I don't want this hole in the middle. So I'm gonna add release on the amp envelope and on the filter envelope. Yeah, that's better. Better than this. Now we don't need to decrease the sustain of the amp, but it's nice just so that you have a little bit lower volume after the decay of the filter. So if you're gonna do anything here on the decay and sustain of the amp, I recommend that you do something like 70% sustain and then match the decay of the filter. Yeah, I think this is optimal. So that's basically it for the envelopes. We're not going to use any resonance because the sound doesn't go right. So 0 resonance. And what I have so far is cutoff pointing at 6, 50% envelope amount, and then no attack, 2.5 seconds of decay, no sustain, 400, 500 milliseconds of release, pointing at 6 here. And then on the amp, also no attack, 2.5 seconds of decay, 70% sustain, and roughly 500, 600 millihertz. If by any chance you think I'm going too fast, maybe you're not as used as I am to synthesizer parameters, then you need to learn more about synthesis. That's where I bring in the sponsor of this video, myself. I have recently released How To Synth, my own online course on synthesis, where you will learn every single button, knob, and fader, not just on the Prophet 5, but on the Mini Moog, the Prophet 5, the Jupiter 8, the CS80, and Pigments. By becoming a student, you will gain access to over 5 years of knowledge that I have condensed into this course. Plus, you get to support me and help the channel keep going. Everybody wins. The link's in the description below. Check it out. Now, I want to moisten the sound a bit because it's too dry, so I'm going to add a chorus. Yep. But 3 voices. And the way to clean out a chorus is by decreasing the rate. The rate's like the speed of the chorus, so fast choruses are garbage basically. Less delay as well. And if you want a wetter chorus, you can go up to 60%, something like this. But I think the sound is not that wet, so I'm gonna go down to 30% here. And it's okay. Better with chorus than with no chorus. Also don't need to be too strict about the chorus, but anyway, that's how I like setting it up. I'm gonna add oscillator number 2 because the sound is still too thin. But oscillator number 2 is in the wrong octave, so let me lower this. That's most of the work. Now the trickiest part is getting the waveform right, but it's definitely not just the sawtooth sound. You're probably used by now, you're probably accustomed to the sawtooth wave because you've been hearing it for the past few minutes. But I'm gonna turn off the saw waves here and turn on the square waves. It's not just a square wave, obviously. I'm gonna turn off oscillator number 2. The pure square sounds like, so I need to move the pulse width here, narrow down the square wave. And here's where I recommend that you spend some time fine-tuning the pulse width for your oscillators, because this is going to vary according to taste. It's not possible to get 100% right, because always remember that the finished sound that you hear on the record is not just the sound of the synth. It has been treated by the hands of the producer or sound engineer, something like that. He can add a chorus to the sound, he can compress the sound, and some compressors actually add harmonics. He can distort the sound a bit, he can drive the sound, saturate with a very slight overdrive, something like this. So my reference point is 85% here for the first oscillator. But by itself, it doesn't sound right. So fading in oscillator number 2, and then getting this down to 80%, but to the other side, which is 20% here. This is the waveform that sounds right in my head, but there's a problem, which is the oscillators are perfectly in tune, and we do need detune as 99% of the times when we're using synthesizers. Now let me just compare it to the preset that I have saved. This one, I spent some time creating it, and then I took a break, went to do some other things, then came back to do the fine tunings, because when you spend a long time fiddling with controls and synthesizers, your ears are very elusive, they mislead you. So you need to take breaks and come back, because your ears get used to the sound that you're hearing. It sounds right. You leave, take 5. When you come back, you see that, wow, it's not close at all. So this one, there's one major difference here. It's not just the square waves with the pulse width modulated. As you can see, it's 85%, 20%, just as I said. And the envelope settings are roughly the same. The detune is roughly the same. The only thing that I did is I added the sawtooth wave here. Now remember, the Prophet, when you add saw and square waves, you aren't adding two oscillators inside of one oscillator, you are combining these waveforms. So this would be the sound of just the square waves. It sounds good, but it's a bit hollow, I would say. And the sawtooth, the pure sound of the sawtooth is very characteristic. Like most people that work with synths can tell that it's just a sawtooth. But when you add the saw and the square with pulse width modulation, I believe it's a lot better. I don't know exactly if they used just a square wave with pulse width modulation, if it was a mix of a square and a saw, if they used distortion, if they used saturation, something like this. I'm happy with this, but I recommend that you spend some time fine-tuning the pulse width of square waves, mixing the sawtooth, because this is how I feel the sound is right. Of course, if you feel like it's too thin still, maybe you can add a saturator from your digital audio workstation, something like that, because here we actually have the option to add distortion and we have all of these options, but I tried some of them and it doesn't really sound right. Even if I do the soft clip, which is the least aggressive of these drives here, it gets too dirty. So yeah. When editing the video, I made some minor adjustments and reached the final result, which was the sound that you heard in the beginning of the video. This is 77%, 25%, and I switched off the saw waves here. I think this is closer. My choice would be using the saw along with the square, but I think just the square and 77 on the first one, 25 on the second one is closer. The same settings with the saw. Yeah. So recapping and doing everything from scratch. New preset. Lower the octave of the two oscillators right away because I want to play it in this octave. You don't need to do this if you want to play it down there. One octave below for the two oscillators. I'm going to use saw and square, but the pulse width is modulated. You can just find a random point and do the rest of the sound and then come back to fine tune the pulse width. Make sure you open up the second oscillator. This detune is too much, I think. So my reference point is 0.09 here, like roughly 9%, 10%. Envelope amount, I remember that it was 50%. The filter is not attached to the keyboard, okay? So press this button right here. That feels like the right sustaining points, but you need to get the sustain down. And this is the action that we're going for, this pow, pow. No resonance, no attack, but this decay is too fast. If you enjoy, if you like faster decays, then you can go 1.5 seconds here. But I would say go 2.5 seconds. But I don't like this hole between the chords, so add some release to the amp envelope and match it on the filter envelope. Yeah, almost there. And then the chorus just to moisten the sound a little bit. You can go for either 2 voices or 3 voices, but make sure you decrease the rate. You don't even need to move the delay. Just if you just lower the rate, it sounds nice already. And for that extra something, a little reverb. This reverb is too much, obviously, but I don't need to teach you how to program reverbs, right? You can use your own reverb from your digital audio workstation or your reverb plugin. It's your choice. So yeah, it's almost exactly the preset that I have saved. That's the bulk of the sound, all right? Now, as soon as he starts singing, you can see that it's not just the Prophet sound. There is actually probably a DX7 electric piano sound. Listen to this. This is not a factory preset, I programmed it, but that's a very basic sound, and I'm gonna show you how I did it. So going into advanced, this is algorithm number 1, and operator number 1 is a carrier. Just using sine waves like the DX7 actually was. And then operator number 2 is modulating the wave of operator number 1. If I use just operator number 1, you're gonna hear pure sine waves. But if you increase the volume here, the level of operator number 2, the frequency of the first operator will be modulated. But I have done some things to the envelope here, so if I would do it again, just going to new preset. This is just algorithm number 1. I'm gonna lower the octave of the first operator. That's the right octave. I want a decay here, some release, some sustain. I don't want it to completely fade out. And then operator number 2, this modulates the first operator. So if I just do this, you hear the frequency changing and it starts sounding more and more like an electric piano. But if you go too far, yeah. So because this level is the frequency modulation, if I do something with the envelope here, if I do an envelope sweep, like I'm going to decrease the sustain point so that I have decay, then the frequency is going to be modulated and less modulated over time. This would be a fast sweep. But I don't want a fast sweep. Something like this, but this range is too high. Yeah, 76 here on the level, 77, something like this. But I don't want to spend too much time here. You can probably find your favorite electric piano, like factory electric piano preset from the DX7. If you want to create it from scratch, I just showed you how to do it. And when he starts singing, we stop hearing the Prophet. We only hear this particular patch. When you play the Prophet sound, I think it's better to play the Prophet along with the DX7. So this would be just the Prophet, just the DX7, and both together. Maybe the DX7 is a bit too loud, but anyways, you figured it out. Now the last sound is the Fairlight. And you don't need to recreate the sound from scratch because this is a very famous sampled sound from the Fairlight. So this is Arturia's CMI-V, which is the software recreation of the CMI. And this Sararr preset is the first preset that opens up when you open the CMI onto your workstation. So if I were to delete this track, create another one, go into plugins, VST, Arturia, double click the CMI to open, and then arm the track. There it is. Okay, so those are the 3 sounds that you need: the Prophet, the DX7 electric piano sound, and Sararr. I don't know how people pronounce it in English, but yeah, Sararr. So yeah, thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, and I think you're gonna like this video next. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to